I'm going to start. So hi, everyone. And this is Nat, founder and CEO of PPEARL. I'd like to welcome you to episode 3 and the final episode of the OSS. And this is us from Singapore. So it's amazing how time has flown, and we are at the end of the series. We've saved the best for last. And today we've got 2 wonderful guests, and I'll be introducing them in a bit. Throughout this conversation, throughout this series, we've had wonderful conversations with respected thought leaders from Singapore, speaking with Francisco and myself about the latest trends in organizational sustainability. So this series is brought to you by Cognitive Talent Solutions, DCH, and HR Tech Hub. And on behalf of them, welcome and thank you for coming to our webinar. Today's episode is titled The Role of Technology in Enabling Employee Well-Being. Oh, no. Today's episode is about achieving sustainable digital transformation. So with me are Francisco Marin, co-founder and CEO of Cognitive Talent Solutions, Vidya Durma, Executive Director, Head of Innovation at DBS Bank, and Valerie Yo, Lead Consultant at the Civil Service College. For the next 30 minutes, we will discuss 2 questions with the panel, and then have 20 minutes for the audience to ask questions. Please feel free to type your comments or questions at any point in time in the chat, and I'll put them forward to the panelists during the Q&A. So let's jump straight into things. And the first question for our panel is the following. How is your organization rising to the challenge of achieving digital transformation in a sustainable manner? Hi, Francisco, and thank you for being here with us, especially since it is 1 a.m. in San Francisco. Maybe I could start with you.
Hi, Nat. Yeah, it's really excited to be here today, closing this series. So in our case, we focus our work on helping companies accelerate digital transformation by understanding and visualizing the informal interactions that exist within their organization. Most companies nowadays approach digital transformation as a project, but really digital transformation is best understood as a ongoing state of agility and responsiveness. Would be best described as a mindset rather than as a project or as an initiative. And most companies out there, when they run this type of initiatives, these are very comprehensive initiatives that have a components of learning and development, components of business processes, customer experience. But the problem is what happens once you complete these projects. Do you go back to the practices that you had prior to launching such initiatives, right? So in that regard, it's important that companies, even if they start with a project, they transition to a mindset where they see digital transformation as a recurrent need. And in that regard, one very important aspect is to have a full understanding of the internal collaboration dynamics, especially in the context of the adoption of hybrid work models and remote work models. Understanding who are the informal leaders within the organization that we can leverage as early adopters, rather than having them create resistance against the changes that we try to implement in the context of digital transformation, right? Let's not forget that 3% of informal leaders can influence up to 85% of the remaining population and accelerate strategic change adoption by up to 40%. If that influence, you have it working against the change you are trying to implement, the ramifications can have a very negative impact on those digital transformation initiatives. Then fostering technology adoption is important, but understanding how to foster technology adoption in an ethical way is even more important. Right, so a lot of the work that we do with companies is when they understand these internal collaboration dynamics, understand where they have to draw the line to respect employees' privacy. Right, so for example, when we're analyzing the digital footprint, we foster doing it at aggregate level, not going into individual level. Try, for example, not to analyze the content of the communications when working with tools like Office 365, but just analyze the metadata and foster up ethical use of technologies like organizational network analysis and people analytics methods. So that's in a summary how we are helping companies accelerate digital transformation, understanding, visualizing, and analyzing how employees and teams interact with each other, but going only at the individual level with active data sources, going at team level with passive data sources, and putting the focus on understanding digital transformation as a mindset rather than as a project.
Thanks for that, Francisco. Hello, Valerie. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Lovely to have you here. Could you share with us how is the civil service rising to this challenge of achieving digital transformation in a sustainable manner?
Yeah, it's a huge piece for all of us. I think there's like 100 over government agencies in Singapore, so that's a lot of the work that I do. I think first thing is we look at it holistically. So what are the tech or the systems that we need to put in place? Then of course there's the processes and the structure, and last but not least, and often the most challenging bit, is the people and the culture. So with the people and the culture bit, I think where we've been seeing that a lot of the changes really need to happen is in the leadership space. So how do we bring leaders together so that there's a common alignment and understanding of what's the vision? How do you form some of these teams together? Because very often we pull people together and we assume that they're going to work fantastically together. But we actually find that that in itself results in a lot of challenges. So how do we bring team alignment and sustain that well? Even with the leadership space, I think in what we are doing in the whole public service is we're looking at it end to end, right? So from how do we change the way we select leaders so there's a lot more diversity in the sort of capabilities that we're bringing in, and this impacts also how we need to develop them. Increasingly, we find that new leadership capabilities are needed, right? Working across boundaries, being able to really balance and navigate some of the tensions. And those are all huge new skill sets. And I guess most recently is also how do you lead and manage in a hybrid or remote working environment. And that's certainly very, very new for us in Singapore Public Service, because everyone's largely located in Singapore. And I'm sure that was probably a little bit different for some of the global companies. So the leadership piece, I think it's one key aspect. The other aspect is also the people in organization, right? Do we know what are things that's frustrating them? And how do we bring them on board that journey and co-opt them in shaping what needs to change? Because a lot of the transformation efforts are indeed quite long drawn. So how do we keep a pulse on how people are feeling frustrations or a real fatigue and exhaustion, and help them also be able to celebrate, right? Celebrate progress and wins along the way, because I think that's important in order to sustain this continuous multi-year journey. So those are, I guess, some of the things that my colleagues and I are focused on, especially in the people and the culture space.
Thanks so much for that, Valerie. Vidyut, could you share with us what DBS has been doing in this area?
Sure. Actually, maybe I'll try and enunciate it through a little bit of, I guess, a story. So over here at DBS, our digital transformation is hinged on 3 pillars: to be digital to the core, to be customer obsessed, and to operate like a startup. Now, if you look at India, in India, we're regarded as a foreign bank. And as a foreign bank, we're limited to only 12 branches. Now, for anyone that knows India, India is huge. 12 branches is nothing. And as a result, for about a decade, we've operated in the country with only about 14 to 16,000 customers. Now, of course, when the mobile phone became rampant and they introduced a digital ID card, we knew there was an opportunity to do more. But we were sort of restricted by needing everyone's fingerprint, because that's part of the process. So now, being digital to the core, we put everything into the mobile phone, completely no signatures, no papers, nothing. Customer obsessed, we started thinking of how and who is our customer. And we landed on the fact that the most perfect customer is people that drink coffee. So then we said, okay, thinking like a startup, to get people's fingerprint, we went and partnered with Cafe Coffee Day, which is the equivalent of Starbucks. And we ended up going from 12 branches to now having 600 outlets. And we put ourselves on the menu. So you could order a cappuccino, a latte, or a DBS bank account. We went from 10 years, 14,000 customers to the next 18 months, 2 million customers. Now, it completely changed our footprint. But coming back to where you talk about change in a sustainable manner, when we went and we pushed this strategy of wanting to reimagine our position in India, we said we would do it with our own people and we would essentially use all the resources within the organization. That's why in Digibank India, the mascot is Digor the dinosaur. So it's very much an internal signal to the organization. It's a symbol that a dinosaur can survive extinction if you're willing to change. And that became the center of our change strategy, to build a workforce that's adaptable. So we have a transformation team that's very focused on empowering and enabling the workforce for adaptability. We know our competitors, technology, our customers are going to change. But when we come around the corner and we peek and we see something that is strange, something that we don't know, are we able to use that and as an opportunity rather than get disrupted? So to Francisco's point at the start, it is about the mindset, but also the skill set and the supporting tool sets. So we work a lot on that adaptable workforce to make sure that we have sustainability. So it's a muscle of change. We say that DBS as such is a gym, and as long as the people can keep exercising that muscle of change, they'll get better and better, and they can lift more and look good.
I love that analogy, muscle of change. We're definitely right about that. Well, on our end, working with a myriad of companies, we've seen huge investment in IT and digitization, and also the fact that digital marketing is no longer an option. So businesses can make better informed decisions. We're also seeing companies using digital transformation as a key strategy to reach sustainability, right? Which is an interesting debate altogether. Is achieving sustainable digital transformation, does it come first? Or is it achieving sustainability through transformation? We'd love to hear everyone's views on this. Before, let's move to the second question, and then I'll bring this up again later. So moving to the next question, what role will technology play in achieving sustainable digital transformation in future? Francisco.
Well, I think we live at such exciting moment in terms of what technology is doing in society, that if we look to the future, the word or the expression digital transformation has almost of an ironic meaning, right? Because when you look at large companies, I heard videos say, we want to operate as a startup. Well, we are the startup, right? Where my mind is right now is how to move to the metaverse and to the blockchain and open a decentralized autonomous organization. So in a way, you could call it the implosion that is to come of large multinationals into decentralized autonomous organization is the ultimate form of digital transformation by itself. Now, that being said, definitely one of the trends that we're going to have in the future is how to adapt to these new realities that are going to come in blockchain, the metaverse, in the Web3, right? That's going to be a completely different way of adopting technology because it's changing the very nature of how organizations operate. Not only about the place where they are incorporated, but also how do they manage themselves? Do they manage themselves as centralized organizations with hierarchical systems or as decentralized organizations with alternative methods? And I think that networks are going to play a critical role in understanding and managing those new realities. But coming back to the topic I brought up earlier, I think really one of the most important things we should be discussing right now in digital transformation is data privacy. Because if we don't have a discussion about that now, then those technologies are going to shape the nature of the activities and the environments where we're all going to operate in a decentralized manner. And there's one of the big players in the industry had to remove, for example, a productivity score from the market following data privacy backlash from a Twitter thread. When you look at most companies that analyze the digital footprint of employees, many of them show the names of the employees, some of them show the emails of the employees that are easily traced back, and even the process of de-identification, that means masking the employees' names. In the end, it doesn't present any useful use case other than allowing managers to kind of like trying to figure out who we are talking about. Even if the employees have the name masked, if you have 10 people in a team and you have metrics like the age, the role, gender, and other metrics, you can easily figure out who you're talking about. So I think having, so I think that moving forward, having that discussion now about how those tools should respect data privacy and from a sustainability perspective, respect employee well-being, respect the well-being of the planet as well, is a critical discussion. And that's where I think is going to be very relevant moving forward.
Thank you for that. Yeah, sorry, I just realized I was on mute. And Vincent, what do you think? What role will technology play in achieving sustainable digital transformation in the future?
So I'll give you two aspects. So one is very internal, and one we can talk a little bit more esoteric. If you talk about people, I mean, humans are creatures of habit. Rituals become habits are internalized into behaviors, and then collective behaviors become a culture. So you talk about digital transformation and transformation of people. If used effectively, technology can be very crucial in supporting and driving change, because you can institutionalize rituals and you have the ability to influence behavior. So that's one from an operational perspective. I'll give you a very simple example. When we were looking at employee productivity, one of the things that came up was meetings, and it was pretty unanimous that most people feel a lot of meetings are a waste of time. So we ended up coming up with this ritual called Meeting Mojo, which is Mojo is meeting owner, joyful observer. So we have a ritual now over here that every meeting starts with the meeting owner saying, this is why we're here. And we appoint a Joe, which is a joyful observer. And at the end of the meeting, they basically will critique the intent of the meeting and if we achieved what we were supposed to. Now, using technology, instead of just having simple, let's say, prompts and nudges or posters, you can codify. We have an app, we have a timer. So we have a mechanism of ensuring that employees are productive in meetings. So we've codified it via technology, which is great. Now that's one aspect. Now I look at the other and touch on a couple of things that I guess Francisco was saying. I look at technology as they're a set of colors. They're like crayons or paints. They're enablers. To make them effective and to make them of value, you have to understand what is the job to be done. What are you trying to achieve? If you can hinge on your customer and if you can hinge on a value proposition, then you're simply using them as tools. They're bricks, they are cement, they're this foundational level, or even pipes and plumbing to achieve what you want to achieve. So we have a clear understanding that we need to focus on jobs to be done first, and then you look at how technology comes into play. You can get very fascinated by all the buzz that's happening, but it's often horses for courses.
Interesting. Yeah. And Valerie, what are your views on this within the public service?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It's certainly an essential enabler, and sometimes a crucial foundational piece that needs to be set in place. So a few years back, I think one of the main complaints that we had as a public service is that, you know, if there was something that wasn't working well, maybe there was a a fishbowl stick, that was kind of dirty in your neighborhood, right? Who's going to follow up on that? Which government agency is going to follow up on that? And at that time, we didn't know, right? And citizens also didn't know who they should reach out to. So one fundamental change where we tapped on technology was to create an app, because we needed to find a way to capture some of this information, make it easy for citizens or members of the public to surface issues and complaints. And then at the back end, someone obviously needs to kind of sort out which government agency it should belong to, or who should respond to it, rather than the poor citizen or the member of the public being bounced from government agency to government agency. So now we have the One Service app that's been super helpful in surfacing a lot of these issues. People can even submit photographs of, where there is a problem, and it makes it a lot easier then for the public officers, the relevant folks, to follow up on what those issues are, and to close the loop. So that's one thing that we're seeing the benefit of tapping on technology for that, at least on the business side of things. More internally, I would say there's been such a wonderful proliferation of tools and resources now in terms of capturing employee views and sentiments. Gone are the days of the once in 2 or 3 year mega employee engagement surveys, right? Now you can tap on tools like Glint or Culture Amp, and you can do quick pulses, get quick sensing, understand, if there's fatigue at play, and that is great data for leaders and managers then to know, okay, do I need to adjust some of the ways that I'm leading, or put in place key resources to really enable people to be the best at what they need to do. So I think that's on the people health front. I think lots of great opportunities there. And also things like coaching online. I've heard that there are coaching tools online, and that's quite amazing. I've not tried it, but it really opens up a whole world of possibilities.
Yeah, indeed. And what we're seeing is that exactly, there's seeding of digital-minded individuals all over an organization. And clearly what we're seeing and hearing from everyone is the use of technology to make lives better, making the world an even smaller place, and continuing to unearth a wealth of data which can be used to then make more positive decisions. I'll also cap off this interesting discussion to say that I think many of us are still experiencing the potential of what technologies are just starting to experience, right? The potential of technologies like robotics, AI, blockchain, machine learning, quantum computing, 5G in action. And I hope, right, that we will bring about a much more far-reaching energy transformation solution. I think healthcare will change dramatically. And yeah, being the optimist that I am, I believe that it will make life better. If I can bring us back to this question that I posed earlier, and please, for everybody who has joined us, do post your questions into the chat box so that we can relay them to the panelists. Is it to achieve sustainable digital transformation the focus first, or achieving sustainability through transformation? What are your views?
I'll start off. So they go hand in hand. Like, even when I look at innovation, if I say the most simplest definition of innovation is creating value by doing things different. So you're creating value by doing things different. Now, inherently, if you're going to do things different, you're bringing in change. Now, if you're bringing in change, then we have this concept of what we call innovation responsibility. If you're going to be a change agent, if you're going to be a change catalyst, you can bring change that can be short-term good and long-term hard. So when people say it should be desirable, viable, feasible, we say it should also be responsible. You need to make sure that the change you're bringing in is not doing any harm, but trying to do as much good. And when you look at doing as much good, it should go beyond just your customer base. It should look at aspects of community, society, environment, and also be timely. So look at this generation, but also the generation of tomorrow. So we add those all into considerations. And if one embraces responsible innovation, then you are definitely making sure that elements of sustainability are baked into the new propositions that you're bringing to market.
You. Francisco, Valerie, any thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's really important that when thinking about change, we add an ethical layer to it, right? Vidit mentioned earlier something really interesting that I picked up, is that technology should be understood as color, as a tool to achieve a certain end, right? I think that's part of the use, but given the current speed of technological advance, we have to start thinking different about technology as well. If we put an analogy of colors, right, it will be about trying to understand what is color, how do color work, and only when you understand the very nature of color, then you can explore multiple possibilities. For example, about color themselves, right? You can understand black color and white color as the color black and white, or you can understand them as the effect of absorbing all the colors and reflecting nothing, or absorbing nothing and reflecting everything, right? So when you understand the potential that technology has to shape the activities that we do on a daily basis, is when you can start anticipating the potential harm. Let's put another analogy. You have a social network, a place that is supposed to be a place for democratic speech, right? Freedom of speech, totally decentralized approach. However, when mixed with the centralized company behind that is managing that decentralized environment, it can turn into a place where freedom is coerced and it's restricted, as is happening right now in many instances. So that's why it's always important not to trust what we see about technology, that often is now the shiny part, but really understand and be sometimes even a bit paranoid or pessimistic about it. Let's put ourselves in the worst case scenario. What somebody could do with this new technology that is arriving that can potentially harm society? And starting with the worst case scenario, you can let the good case scenario take care by itself. That's, I think, how we should be approaching the new technologies that are coming now at the moment. Only by anticipating the worst case scenario, we can make sure that we can really lead these technologies into creating new realities that are going to do good and not bad.
Right.
So Francisco, I completely agree, but for the sake of being the devil's advocate and playing a contrary and creating a discussion, it cuts both ways. You can look at saying that, okay, if we don't have a central authority, let's say the example of freedom of speech, etc., it could also work the other way, where you have the ability to use the tool for misinformation. You could be very consciously using it for exactly the opposite means, and you're relying then on the intellect or the consciousness of people. And I can tell you, sad but true, most people don't put in the time and effort to validate. So over here, so then it works in a way that it could be completely counterproductive. So there's a bit of a toing and froing on different principles and schools of thought, but it is very interesting. And I also am like Natasha, a complete optimist, but I've seen things go completely the opposite way. And you wonder, like, you talk about data privacy, it's sad but true, but quite frankly, a lot of people don't give a shit. They don't care. This notion of privacy, etc., it is very gimme, gimme, gimme. And if they're getting what they want, data privacy is a price to pay.
Okay, we're unmuted now. There was some echo there. Sorry.
I think our friends in Spain have to help us mute some of the people. Thank you.
Maybe
Okay.
taking on a slightly different track. No, I do definitely agree with Bidrit in terms of his earlier point that they both go hand in hand, right? And at the same time, I think there's a need to really keep a sense of what is happening and whether you need to adjust some of the plans. Because I think what I'm noticing, at least from some of my own internal stints as a practitioner supporting organizations in that journey, is that if you don't calibrate, right, some of the changes, will people get burnt out in the process? Because even implementing new digital technology systems in itself will require not just a mindset shift, but really a lot of effort just to revamp and re-examine processes, and clarify what is the job that we need to get done, and is this the best way of doing it? And some of those efforts can be quite daunting as well. And I think, at least in the public service, looking at some of the government agencies who've had to then also invest in lots of effort to do the crisis management of managing some of those COVID efforts, I think the reality was that some of us had to, in a way, do a slight pause on some of the digital transformation efforts so that energy could be rightly diverted to some of the crisis efforts. And then when things kind of stabilize a bit, rechannel back some of those efforts. That's what we're also experiencing on our end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Oh.
I think sorry, just want to mention, I think the government moving forward is going to play a critical role in how those technological changes are adopted, because governments need to set the policy. And Singapore actually is probably one of the countries that has the highest level of technological literacy in the world, right? If you talk about decentralized autonomous organizations, blockchain, Web3, organizational network analysis, these are commonly known topics that are completely unknown in other countries. But again, I think whenever you achieve something with technology, you also achieve the opposite, right? If you protect data privacy, you also result in loss of freedom. If you block misinformation, you are also resulting in loss of freedom in a certain way, right? But it's not really that much about how to avoid certain scenarios, but it's about how to go through the process of trial and error as fast as possible. And how to integrate technology into the design of those platforms so that those mechanisms can be integrated by default and not a person deciding what is good, what is bad. That's how I'm looking at it. I really am a big a believer in processes. If a person, independently of the potential or the talent that person has, is operating in the wrong system, is not going to move forward. If that person is operating the right system, is going to move forward and really be able to grow and realize their potential. The problem right now is the technology is becoming so disrupted and is accelerating that process of trying error so fast that we are not looking at it in terms of years, but in terms of months. 6 months ago, I thought that decentralized autonomous organization, blockchain, and the metaverses was everything at fuzz. And I'm the first one that is annoyed by the crypto bros with the NFTs. But now, for example, in Silicon Valley, I'm seeing many investors that don't invest in the centralized organizations anymore, only decentralized organizations. I see more money being moved in the crypto space than in centralized organizations. So especially in the financial sector, for example, this is something that should be super concerning, because we could see in a few years from now a reality where there are only 7 or 8 banks existing in the world, and most of them operating through mostly cryptocurrencies, right? So in that context, the conversation on how to manage technology at organization level turns into a conversation on how are we going to live with the fact that technology is going to change the very way that organizations exist and are understood today. That's how we're looking at it, at least.
So Francisco, since you got the sentiment at that end of the world, I mean, so we one of the banks where, yes, we've made a bet. We've got our own crypto exchange. We've got tokenization. We've got digital asset custody. So we are in the space. But sometimes we scratch our heads and wonder that, yes, there's so much money and so many people entering the space, but we kind of get the sense that a majority of them are running with the hype and they are fueled by greed and FOMO, but they really have no clue what they're doing.
Yeah, but that's the nature of new technology. When internet appeared, we had the dot-com boom, and a lot of people lost their money, and yet internet has really shaped the way that we communicate today. We have to understand it not in terms of black and white, but in terms that it's really an ongoing process, and every new adoption of technology has a phase where we have a high level of hype, then we have much lower expectations, and then finally is when the productive phase starts, right?
Yeah.
But I'm the first one that I also see a lot of hype right now, with the NFTs, a lot of scamming in the cryptocurrency space. And that's why I think that, one of the things that is very well done in Singapore is that from the government, there are public initiatives to really educate people on new technology and how it works. And through information and understanding, that's the power that we need at the moment. Since we have a bit of a disruption today.
Oh, that's the beauty of technology, right?
Welcome to the future.
Indeed. Well, we have a question. Thanks for that, guys. Very, very interesting discussion. Puja asks, so almost half of the world population is still offline, right? And so how do we manage this digital divide as we move and rocket ahead into digital transformation? We're leaving half of the world behind. What are your views? Are you able to speak? Okay.
Yeah, well, just to make a quick comment on that, the isolation of certain parts of the world in terms of access to the internet, it's also a byproduct of centralization. Just to be clear, I'm not in favor of complete decentralization, because if we have a single decentralized system in the whole world, then in the moment that that system falls down, all we go down with that. But I'm in favor of different decentralized system operating in parallel. The problem right now is that we do have the technology to put a Wi-Fi signal across the whole world, and even people like Elon Musk already suggested, why are we not doing this? Why don't we put satellites around the world and create a single signal? Well, the reason is because there are interests that are not benefiting from that, right? And maybe there are some interests that they are not benefiting from all people in Africa having access to the internet. So, but again, that's a byproduct of centralization in turn, right? In the moment that you have centralization, that means you have hierarchy. In the moment that you have hierarchy, it means you have a person that is in a position of power and a person that is in a position of less power. And it's inevitable that the person that is in power is going to try to exercise that power to put the person in the other position in a less favorable. So if we don't solve the root cause, for me, and maybe I'm very biased, but for me, I really see hierarchy and centralization as the root cause of many of the problems that we have in society nowadays, whether it is access to the internet, whether other sometimes issues related to diversity and inclusion, even they have a root cause in centralization. It will be very interesting to explore. But that's really the key to understand and mitigate in the future, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree and echo. It's sad but true. The world is unfair, but sadly, there's arbitrage in that unfairness, and I'm not sure how and when and what that change is, what's going to take to bridge that divide and make that change. But yes, I do believe that the world would be a way better place if we could cross that chasm.
Yeah, I think definitely with COVID, we've seen how that economic and social divide has really made it so salient, right? We had situations where many students, when we had to do home-based learning, they didn't, if they were from lower income families, they didn't have a laptop or a device. And that was a huge problem. And that's certainly a big concern. I think what's been encouraging is seeing the community rise up to some of these needs and, you know, kind of initiate to crowdsource and revamp old computers and really reaching out to support some of these groups of individuals. And heartened to hear that, you know, even some of those efforts are also now taken on a bit more centrally to really subsidize some of that sort of equipment, for example, for students on the education front. But yeah, this is definitely a huge challenge. I think even with the digital transformation, maybe the other group that might be potentially left behind could be some of, you know, our older family members and friends, where they're not so savvy with using a mobile phone. I was doing some work, community work, in one of the housing estates in Singapore before COVID hit, and a huge issue for these elderly folks was just that social isolation. So I can't imagine what it was like for them when COVID hit and you know, kind of in a semi-lockdown. It was then impossible, and I'm sure those were even bigger challenges for them in terms of their physical and mental well-being.
Yeah, but there's a flip side to that, Valerie. My parents are all over social media, and they're my nightmare. They're all over TikTok and Instagram.
WhatsApp as well, yeah. Yeah.
My dad's definitely a lot more digital savvy in terms of getting the latest device, much more than me.
Nat, you're muted, sir.
Oh yes, okay. Thanks. No, I said it's been many years, but I do remember the shock I had when my parents tried to add me as their friends on Facebook, you know. And then my friends' parents, I was like, why? Why? We have family and it's okay. So I have a question here. A big one. The UN 2030 agenda has emphasized that the potential of digital technology to enhance sustainability performance has been emphasized. But there is sort of unclear literature regarding whether there is a positive relationship between digitization and sustainability. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, that's where we launched this this series, right? I think we are one of the few events out there that use the term organizational sustainability, right? Because again, well, first of all, if we are talking about sustainability in terms of climate change, you know, this is a very important topic. Very important to say, you know, how is technology affecting sustainability? Big advocate of electric vehicles, for example, brands like Tesla that are really changing. Here in Silicon Valley, you see almost more Teslas than any other car. It's really beautiful in terms of the pollution, in terms of the noise that they make and so on, right? But now, if we are talking about how we are using technology to create a system that is going to last for the next 20, 50 years, right? That's also a very important topic. Do we have right now a system that is sustainable? I would say no. I would say that, you know, when you have a mentality that is always some mentality, when you have productivity tools that call quiet days that you don't work outside working hours, when you have, you know, people that are just resigning from companies because they are not allowed to work from home and they're forced to commute and you know, and to just spend their time on activities that are completely non-value added, and they are not able to follow their passion. When you have people that, you know, go to startups and don't care about having total financial uncertainty, and you know, and work for 20 hours a day for 3 years without a salary, you know, until things start working, you know, you have something that is happening in society that we are not addressing, right? But I think definitely the fact that the United Nations are starting to approach this topic, it's a step in the right direction. You cannot fix a problem if you don't recognize that there is a problem. You cannot improve something that you cannot measure.
But I think sadly, I mean, it is true that there's a lack of consciousness very, very simple example. When you talk about digitization and you're looking at reducing your different scopes and your carbon footprints, a lot of organizations will look and saying, okay, I've got a huge data center. I move to the cloud. I digitize everything, and I get a carbon footprint off my books. But over there, again, when you look at cloud, because cloud and using the cloud is so much more cheaper, you tend to encourage a lot of wastage. If you're not maximizing your horizontal and your vertical usage, you can end up consuming way more than you ever would have in any other shape or form. So you still end up then burning, and you've digitized and you've automated, and maybe you saved paper on one end, but you're burning a whole lot of energy on the other end, and it's basically counterproductive. So it's understanding the consciousness, because if there's a motivation, the motivation is around cost efficiency and performance, and the consideration of sustainability is an afterthought or at the bottom, or even not even in your consideration. That's when things get sticky, and digitization is simply for other value drivers rather than sustainability. And that's where, if you've got a level of understanding and consciousness, then it converts into considerations, and those considerations, you understand trade-offs, and then you can make better decisions. And I think that's where there's a bit of a gap, where people haven't connected the dots and the storylines and the narratives. Uh, so I think there's certainly way more work needed in this space.
Maybe it's because it's so difficult for people to connect, right? Because it's so broad and so big. So maybe we can bring it down to the individual. What can the ordinary person do if they want
But
to
actually,
say?
I mean, all things are complex, but it's more, I think complexity becomes an excuse, which is my bugbear. I think if you're willing to put time and effort and sit down, I mean, we've managed to put a person on the bloody moon. I don't think there are problems we can't solve. It's just a matter of, if it's important enough and it's prioritized and we're willing to dedicate some time and effort, I don't think it's a hard thing to fix. But yes, do people feel it's important enough? And then that's where, if you aren't able to understand the gravity, or it becomes something that's so far off, then that's when the mindset is stunted.
Valerie, what about you? Like, what's the civil service trying to do, to empower individuals, right, in this endeavor? Is it about education?
Yeah. No, certainly education, and I think what we are noticing is that there's a lot of effort to really also encourage people to be a lot more conscious about some of these issues, and have the willingness to surface these things up, right? Gone are the days where it's a culture that you do what your boss says, and those are the priorities. Increasingly, we are also finding that we need to create a space where people can say, this is something that really matters to me, and it should matter to us, right? Can we galvanize a few people to do something, even if it's a small thing? And I think that's one of the things that we've been trying to push, especially on the innovation front. And certainly I can see pockets of that also happening in some of the sustainability, environmental sustainability agenda as well. But it's baby steps, right? And how do we encourage people to take some of these baby steps to be a lot more conscious about these things?
But Valerie, that's why I think maybe we all take a bit of a soft approach, and I mean, the problem is real, the problem is grave, and we seem to be running out of time. That's why sometimes I think it might be easier. So I was at another, there was this intergovernment talk, and I said, maybe we should have a very clear, even if you don't know, there's gray areas and how much you can do. I think there's a real clarity in what we shouldn't do. So at least we should have a hard line in saying these things do not do, because these things are definitely creating harm. Because the moment we give people choice, people move to doing what is most convenient, and sadly most convenient to them. That's why I think we need to take a much harder approach And while I conceptually agree with baby steps, I think we should have been already running by now. And because we're not, I feel sometimes we shouldn't give people so much lax in time. I think it's time to get that stick out. It's time to
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, what's been encouraging is the last few years, even in my previous stints in MAS, really to see some of this being taken very, very seriously, and kind of putting in place structures and policies and figuring out, how do we really take a stronger stance on some of these things. And at the same time, I think at the individual level, what are things that we can do within our means?
Well, I think honestly we have to appreciate the power of non-action, right? And like when we are without doing anything, actually our brain goes into something called default mode, where actually we are much more able to think about strategic problems and how to solve it, problems that don't affect us in the immediate short term, right? But if I think one of the biggest problems that we have nowadays is the always on culture, right? The thing that, if you're busier, you are better. I recently was in a conversation about a very renowned executive, right? And the way that, for example, the people were talking about that executive, she's always super busy. It was almost like a positive connotation. She's so important that he's always busy. For me, I would say, a person that is always busy is in a way showing that he's not very smart, because he's not managing their time in a very effective manner. Independently of the tasks that you have, you can always find a way to, I mean, I'm connected here from Silicon Valley at 2 a.m. in the morning, so that's not very smart time management. But, but I think giving people time to think, to relax, it's the best way to ensure they have a higher level of productivity when they're actually working. And let's not forget that, here in the US, half of the young population have diagnosed mental problems. There is a big issues with depression, with anxiety, with burnout risk. These are systemic issues rather than specific issues. Of course, the pandemic have accelerated them, but they were systemic issues that were in place before the pandemic. So we need to have a very serious conversation about it, because mental health is becoming something very, very real. And as a founder, I can testify to that.
Indeed. I think we have maybe room for a last question. And bringing it back to the workplace, the question was, what strategies or tactics can leaders implement to increase sustainability?
When you talk about sustainability, we're talking about saving the planet here. We're talking about sustainable as in what we talked about, organizational change.
I think over here it's about organizational change. Yeah, organizational sustainability.
So very much over here, what we do is, so we kicked off our transformation journey in 2009. And we were very specific to augment it into a digital transformation in 2014. But even if you look at starting in 2009, again, going to that point of a muscle, we have trained the organization where the organization knows that every year there is an impetus to be different to the year before. So we're very sold in. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Simon Sinek, his talk on Infinite Game, where he basically talks about your biggest competitor being yourself rather than anyone external. So you're always looking at a better self of yourself. So that is what we sort of subscribe for. So we are pushing the organization to keep reinventing itself. Now, it's easy to say it, but this is where what we've done is to send a clear signal and to ensure that there is tangible action to it. We have what we call a balanced scorecard, and the balanced scorecard is your set of KPIs and your set of priorities for the year. 20% of our scorecard is very specifically for how we are transforming the bank. that means 20% of your KPIs are incentivizing you that your this year should look different than the year before. So even if you've got a product and your product is selling great and you sell more, the question is asked is your product any different? So it's incentivizing change. Is your processes any different? Is the customer happier, etc., etc.? So it's incentivizing change. So that, and because of course your bonus is dependent on it. If anyone that knows banking, if it's dependent on your bonus, it gets done. So we've gone to the point of having soft pushes and nudges, but we've also gone to the other point of having hard signals of the organization needing to be adaptive and needing to keep reimagining, or you get left behind.
Thank you for that. Well, we are about to close, but let me just wrap up what we've heard so far, right? So, well, bottom line is, I think transformation's an ongoing process, right? It constantly evolves, and there's no way of reaching pure sustainable digital transformation. That's what I'm hearing anyways. We just need to keep ensuring that it is, continually sustainable. And some of the lessons are start with people, right? Ensure that you build a workforce that is adaptable, agile, create value by doing things differently, and borrowing from what Bijit was saying, give everybody the innovation responsibility. So it rests in their hands, right? And incentivize them in different ways. There were big issues tackled today. We talked about decentralization, data privacy, the digital divide. We talked about choice and freedom versus rules and parameters, the need to rest and be productive. So really love all those dichotomies and big topics that, characterize how big this issue is, right? So thank you to everybody for speaking. Really appreciate it. Our guests, as well as our producers, TTS, DCH, and IHRP.